All right, y'all. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J is live. We in the building. We about to get into another great show. Got a lot to get into tonight. Of course, we're going to start our show as we did last week in Ferguson, Missouri. There's a lot of updates going on, and we're going to have the latest for you. SY is going to talk to us about ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. There's a lot going on with these ice bucket challenges. But what is ALS? We're going to talk about it. And we got the Dating Pool Diva in the building for the Diva Diaries. We got a packed show for y'all as we do every single week. And you know how Steppin with Marcus J is right now. Yeah. It's about that time. It's about that time to get.
Button your lip, open your ears, strap on your thinking cap. Socially conscious talk that's entertaining with a dash of humor and the top sports stories of the week. It's time for Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J.
Sellers has Jordan. Jordan with 2 seconds to go. Puts it up and scores at the buzzer. Michael Jordan has won it for Chicago. Manning lobs it. Burris alone. Touchdown, New York.
Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. He hits one deep to right center. That ball is out of here. The Yankees win the pennant.
If they lying, then they must be half stepping. Ain't no half stepping. Marcus J is back live. Be down with us tonight. 804-402-2893 to be down with the flagship show on Legacy Internet Radio. Glad to have everybody listening to us. Thank you to the folks that are listening to us on TuneIn about the web. Thank you to everybody that used to listen to us on MixLR that moved on to tune in other areas to listen to our show. Thank you to everybody that's listening to the replays right now on YouTube. Ain't No Half Stepping with Marcus J is sponsored by Live Action Captions. You'll hear a spot from them later on, as well as Free Spirit Enterprises. So at this time, we're going to get through our salutations and get the crew that we have here for you tonight kind of introduced, and then we're going to move through the show tonight. Of course, joining us on a monthly spot, we have her every single fourth Monday to go through the Diva Diaries. I got my sister, the Dating Pool Diva, in the building. What's up, girl?
Hey, thank you for having me tonight.
Well, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
You hanging in there?
I'm looking forward to the show, bring my spirits up a little bit.
That's what I'm talking about. We got a lot to get into. Of course, I let it off at the top that our sister SY is going to talk to us about ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, talk to us about these ice bucket challenges and what is going on with those. And so we'll have her commentary on that later on. And so we're looking forward to it. But at this time, we're going to lead off the show, kind of piggyback to our first hour that we did last week here on Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J on Legacy Internet Radio. We're talking about Ferguson, Missouri. There's a lot going on there, and there's a lot to kind of talk about. And so today, we know that Mike Brown was laid to rest. Mike Brown, of course, was the young man that was shot and killed by Darren Wilson, the Ferguson, Missouri police officer. And so today was Mike Brown's funeral. Lots of invited guests and dignitaries were invited to Ferguson, Missouri to take part in those, I don't want to say festivities, but, you know, the ceremony, I guess, for lack of a better term. Quite a few people. I saw a list that included the names of Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, Attorney General Eric Holder, Snoop Dogg. I mean, the list goes on and on of the people who supported the cause of the Brown family, and they were invited to take part in the homegoing ceremony for Mr. Brown today. So what I want to really do, I wrote down a ton of notes as I usually do, and sometimes we get to them and sometimes we don't. But one thing I definitely want to make sure, Diva, that we kind of talk about is the Darren Wilson supporters. Now, Darren Wilson is the officer who shot and killed Mike Brown, and last week when we came on, I had mentioned how I found a website that had basically crowdfunding for this man who now we know is on paid leave and in witness protection right now, being harbored. It took them almost a full week after the incident before they even released his name, but now we know that he's somewhere in hiding. Who knows where he is? As long as his ass shows up in court when they indict him, then that's all that really matters to me. But they have raised, and when I say they, I mean the people who are supporting Darren Wilson. They have raised a whole bunch of money for this fellow. Almost $400,000. I'm getting this from CBSNews.com. Almost $400,000 has been raised on the online fundraising site GoFundMe.com for the 6-year police veteran. At the first fundraising drive reached its goal of $234,000. The second page was established and has brought in more than $153,000 in just 4 days. More than 9,000 people combined and have contributed to the two fundraising pages. By contrast, more than 8,600 people have donated about $250,000 to the GoFundMe page set up for Mr. Brown. Thousands of mourners attended his funeral again today, which was in St. Louis. And there's obviously there's more here, but I like to kind of open up the discussion for anybody that's listening. You can hit us up on our Facebook pages, hit us up on the Legacy Internet Radio fan page, or as well as on our personal pages, or the Ain't No Half Step or Marcus J page, or call us at 804-402-2893, which is the number to dial to be a part of the discussion tonight. So Diva, I'll ask you, you see this officer has been, well, he hasn't been charged. I almost say has been charged. He hasn't been. He's been identified, I guess is the correct phrase. $240,000 raised for a guy that shot someone else. What's your thoughts when you see something like that?
Well, my first thought was I'm upset the fact that he's able to walk freely. You know, there's no bail set. He's not arrested or anything for murdering someone's child. And then the second thing, you're going to earn money for your defense or whatever. What about raising money for Mike Brown's family and the funeral and all of that entails? You know, I just feel like people just have their heads backwards nowadays and their priorities in the wrong place. Right. Why are you not supporting the victim? Why are you supporting the perpetrator?
Right. Well, the article alludes to how they have raised some money for Mr. Brown. But here's my question. Here's I guess what I want to allude to. We live in a climate where you can be the shooter and you're raising money. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not going to point the finger. I'm not going to point the finger at Darren Wilson, because who's to say that he's somewhere at a computer saying, "Please give me money"? I don't think that that's what's happening. But obviously, we live in a climate where people can be given just the basic information. Of course, there are some folks who are going to reserve their comment until they have it all come out. But for me, all you really have to tell me is that you've got an unarmed person versus someone that has a gun and they get shot like 8-9 times. So you had, what did they say? He got hit 6 times, 4 in his arms and 2 in his head. That's really all you need to tell me. Now, you probably don't want me on that jury.
Right.
To be completely frank, it doesn't matter his color to me, and if I'm looking at it from that perspective. If I'm looking at it holistically, I have to beg the question, how is it that it's typically our young men that this happens to? Right. As I mentioned, last week, and the week before that, I read the names of 20 black men who were shot and killed by police. I'm going to do it again for the 3rd week in a row. Oscar Grant, Romarley Graham, Travaris McGill, Ronald Madison, James Brissett, Wendell Allen, Alonzo Ashley, Stephen Washington, Victor Steen, Aaron Campbell, Orlando Barlow, Sean Bell, Timothy Stansberry, Osman Zongo, Patrick Dorismond, Amadou Diallo, Irvin Jefferson, Timothy Russell, Kendrick McCabe, Kimani Gray, Eric Garner, Mike Brown. 20. And there's more. I could read more. Right. I'm not going to. I don't know that any demographic in our country, male, female, white, Asian, could go through 20 names just in 15 years, because the oldest on that list that I just read is 15 years ago, 1999. And so when I look and I see that the man that shot the most recent of those names that I read has raised $400,000 for him to take care of his family while he can't work, even though he's on paid administrative leave. Diva, just something about that don't feel right to me.
Well, my answer to that will be that we in our community accept it. We don't do anything about it. And I'm going to ask you a question. Can I be the host for a minute?
Absolutely.
Is our community powerless? Like, do we not have any power that we can just let countless people in our community get murdered and it just happens? Oh, that's sad. Oh, that's sad. But nothing happens.
You know what it is? I don't have the answer to that, but what I will say is this. We got a community of punks, and we got a community of lazy people, and we got a community of people who read the newspaper and watch the news and get caught up in the same brainwashing scheme that, you know, other folks get caught up in, and they assume that every young man, every young black man, because he has his pants sagging, his hat to the side, and cornrows, that he's up to no good. Well, I can tell you something. I live in a neighborhood where I see that demographic, but they're good kids. They just, that's how they look. That's how they roll.
Right.
You know, when I was young, we used to wear 2-color jeans and shell-toe Adidas with no laces in it, and they thought that we was the thugs. I was one of those cats. I don't think anybody would have looked at me and called me a thug. You know what I mean? But I think what ends up happening is the media and the people that control the media are the ones who brainwash the viewers. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on. But the truth of the matter is, crime happens wherever the criminal is. If the criminal's in the black neighborhood, then the crime's going to happen in the black neighborhood. If the criminal is in Chinatown, then the crime's going to happen in Chinatown. It doesn't matter where you are, but for some strange reason, well, I shouldn't say for some strange reason, because it's always been that way. I can tell you, about 2 weeks ago, there was a story, and I've told this story before, and I'll tell it again for our new listeners. 804-402-2893 is the number to dial to be part of the show tonight. I'll tell the story for the new listeners here. There was a local story here on NBC.com, the local NBC Channel 12 here, and there was a story about a middle-class white neighborhood where there was someone that was robbing houses, and they interviewed a woman who said that the perpetrator was a middle-aged white man who was dressed in workers' clothes as if he belonged there. But while she's talking and while you're watching the story, they're showing video of a young black male with his pants sagging, peeping in windows. So why are we looking at a young black male peeping in windows during a story that's telling us about a middle-aged white man who is robbing people?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so obviously I was outraged when I saw that. And shout out to my homegirl, Kim, who tipped me off to it. And Kim wrote a letter and I wrote a letter. I know other folks wrote a letter and they took it down.
Because criminals, they must be black, right?
Well, that was kind of what my thinking was. And that was the gist of the letter that I wrote to the news director as well as the reporter on that story. But the point that I make here is that is a very subtle way that they can brainwash the masses. You know what I mean? You know, when we watch the news and they lead off the news with stories about black men in neighborhoods doing things untoward. I'm sure they do things untoward in white neighborhoods. You know what I mean? When I guess it was one day last week, or it was a couple of days right after the Mike Brown killing, and they did this story about missing cats. Missing cats. You know, they did a 2-minute story at the 4-minute mark of the 11 o'clock news about missing cats before they talk about.
That's to divert your attention from the real issue.
You know, so, you know, when you've got people like me, you know, who, you know, get outraged by this, and you got people who want to tell me that there's something wrong with my outrage because I'm not afraid to talk about race. I'm not afraid to call out a black man who's going to have negative opinions about, you know, white people as a whole, or white people who have negative opinions about black people as a whole. For me, it's about people, and it's about the truth, and it's about what I'm seeing. And if what I'm seeing is cops killing black men in the street, I'm going to talk about that.
Right.
If it was the other way around, I would talk about that too. but it ain't the other way around. What do you think this world would do if black cops started shooting white men in the street? Think about that for a second.
Wrapped up real quick.
I mean, it wouldn't even be. I could tell you one thing: you wouldn't be able to read 20 names. That's for sure. And let's talk about Michael Brown's killer, Darren Wilson, for just a minute. Up until 3 years ago, Wilson was a police officer in the small town of Jennings, which is about 4 miles from Ferguson. Which was a hotbed in itself. Law enforcement in that town were reportedly overwhelmed with complaints about racial bias, harassment, strained relations between the nearly all-white police officers in the community that was 89% black. The incident that reportedly rocked the Jennings community was when an officer, and it wasn't Wilson, but it was an officer. He followed a woman outside the city's limits and fired at her vehicle with the child still in the back seat. The shooting sparked outrage throughout Jennings, which resulted in the city council firing all 45 of the town's police officers. Wilson reportedly did not have any disciplinary action problems during his Jennings stint, but he worked in that town where race relations amongst blacks in the police force were non-existent. Now he's obviously standing accused of the killing, senseless executing is what I will call it, and what News1.com is calling it, because that's where I'm reading this article from. In addition, Wilson's mother, Tanya Durso, who was reportedly convicted of some stuff on an artist at age 35 when she was just 16 years old. They always like to throw in that kind of stuff. In the interest of full disclosure, I'll read it here because it's here. But the point that I'm making is that you've got this cop who was part of a police department that had every single cop on the force fired because they were all part of racial tensions and had issues with the community. This is the officer that is now standing accused of shooting Mike Brown. I find that very, very curious. What do you think about that?
I'm trying to figure out what's the difference. Why did they fire 45 officers for that situation, but in this situation, there's no action? I mean, he's just in question.
It's a very.
I don't understand.
I don't understand it either. It's a very, very good question. Ain't no half stepping. Marcus J. 804-402-2893. To finish that point on his mom, Tanya Durso. I'm reading this article. I'm getting it from her. She was convicted forger and con artist, and this is what they're saying here in this particular article. But I always find it curious how we like to, and I'm reading that to make the point that we always like to throw that kind of stuff in these articles so that we deflect. And when we talked a few minutes ago about how we talking about cats missing and we talked about other stuff instead of the actual issues, it's often that we find ourselves looking at things that are not very relevant to the story that we're talking about, and this is one of those situations. 804-402-2893 is the number to dial. I want to transition. The reason why I want to transition is because what I would like to do is I would like to play a clip for you guys that is a little bit interesting because it speaks about the differences between how young black males may be treated when they're unarmed and how others may be treated when they are potentially armed. Take a listen to this. It's about a 2-minute clip, and then the Diva and I are going to talk about it.
Tonight, the photographer who captured this terrifying video of a man waving a gun in Mission Bay is talking only to 10 News about being in the line of fire. Young children ran for their lives, hiding behind a bathroom as the drama unfolded.
That man is in the hospital tonight after being hit by a police officer's bullet. In the past few hours, 10 News reporter Real Creighton tracked down the man who actually shot the video. And Real, at one point, the man pointed the gun at him.
Yeah, he did. And actually, you will see that moment. That man was on the grass here wielding that gun. The photographer standing just off the grass here, watching it, capturing it tonight, reliving it for us. It's Mission Bay's Deanza Cove, a man surrounded by police, thought to be suicidal.
I knew he was going to do something.
Ed Beyer, a local photographer, was one of the first on the scene and one of the only ones to capture every heart-stopping minute of what would turn out to be a nearly hour-long standoff. Beyer in the middle, less than 100 yards away, as this 46-year-old man, already negotiating with officers in the park, heads back to his car, then reemerges.
I actually yelled out, because I didn't know if the officers near me knew it or not, but I yelled, "Gun! Gun!"
Side by side with law enforcement with guns drawn and a man who police say was pointing his weapon recklessly.
Pointing the gun, and at the time he was, it was doing this type of thing.
It's through Byer's lens you see the moment the gun is aimed at him. Then,
like lightning, you see the lightning first, and then the thunder comes second. So I saw him go down, and he went down immediately. And then I heard the crack of the shot. It was one shot, and that was it.
The man down within inches of the trigger as nearly a half an hour passes while officers try to convince him to move away from the gun. He eventually does, and police move in. But even for a professional, capturing this was intense. Now, sorry about that. Police actually the fire, the sprinklers just turned on here. Anyways, police say the man have not yet released that man's name, but say he is in serious but stable condition. The officer who shot him, a 9-year veteran of the force. We're live at Danza Cove tonight. Riel Creighton, 10 News.
Ain't no half Steppin Marcus J. All right, Diva. You seen the video. The folks couldn't see the video, but they could hear the audio. So why don't you describe for the Ain't No Half Steppin Marcus J listeners, 804-402-2893 is the number to dial to be a part of the show. And by the way, thank you to folks listening to us on TuneIn and everybody that's listening to the replays right now on YouTube. But Diva, you saw the video. Why don't you tell the listeners what you saw?
From what I could see, the man was walking back and forth, waving a gun, pointing it at people, and basically threatening people for what they said an hour. Had he been brown, he wouldn't have made it.
Had he been a black man, come on now, we're not gonna do that.
Well, the color brown, he would have been down in like two minutes.
What makes you say that? Why do you say that? What
based on history.
Okay.
Based on these recent stories. You don't even have to have a weapon. You don't have to wave anything for an hour.
Neither did those 20 men whose names I read earlier. None of them had a weapon.
Right.
You end up dead. You ended up dead. Now, they said in this particular article he was waving that gun around recklessly for an hour before the police decided, okay, it's enough. Enough is enough. Part of me, I guess, kind of understands that. I think that is somewhat reasonable. And I also think that it's reasonable that they hit him with a non-lethal shot. The kind of non-lethal shot.
Did it hit his leg?
I couldn't tell in the video. I couldn't tell in the video doesn't. And you see him get shot. Right. Oftentimes you don't even see that. But you see him get shot. His shot is clear. If you're listening to us, you heard the shot, and then you're watching the video, you can see him get shot. You just can't tell where on his body he gets shot. But wherever he was shot, he just popped right up. It couldn't have been that bad because his ass got right back up and then decided, okay, that hurts. And then he laid down for the police to take him in. And so that begs the question, what is the difference between that person and the 20 people whose names that I just read? Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm sure that there's instances out there where white men get killed by the police. I'm sure. I've seen it. I know that happens. But what I'm having trouble with is why Mike Brown could be dead right now, and Eric Garner, who got choked out because he allegedly was selling cigarettes, and when they ended up investigating, they realized that he had sold cigarettes in the past. That's why the police was messing with him, but he ain't have none that day, and they choked him out. Right. You know what I mean? So why does this dude get an hour to wave his gun recklessly?
And could have killed a whole bunch of people.
I mean, the guy who's filming it, and you see it. I mean, obviously they interviewed the guy. He's filming it. And he could have been shot himself, So when I see that, it really upsets me, because I talk to people all the time who, and I blog a lot. I like to talk to people other than people who agree with me. I wish that we had more white listeners and more police that listen to us, because, I think that it would be fair for us to have a fair dialogue. I know that I come on strong sometimes, but don't be a punk. Debate. You know what I mean? Because the truth of the matter is, I don't like those people who don't have nothing to say, because you cannot progress unless you have discussion.
Right.
You know, have Steppin, Marcus J. We'll take a little bit of a different turn. The Missouri governor has decided that he, and his name is Jay Nixon, he is not going to do anything about the prosecutor in this case. Now, why am I asking about the prosecutor? I'm getting this one from the Huffington Post. The prosecutor in this particular case, Bob McCullough, he is being criticized by many in Ferguson and beyond for his ties to the police. His father was a police officer killed in the line of duty by a black man. McCullough began presenting evidence this week to a 12-person grand jury that will decide whether to indict Officer Darren Wilson. Obviously, we know he shot Mr. Brown. McCullough has said the process could last as long as October. And the governor could ask McCullough to step aside so that he could appoint a special prosecutor, but he has not done so. The state senator, Jamila Nisheed, says they're not listening. This person organized a petition drive calling for this special prosecutor. Now, she said that she walked out of the meeting at one point before returning. Nixon could face a political backlash if he replaced McCullough in the highly charged case, but State Rep Carla May says that people she represents are asking for more. Constituents want justice, and they want an arrest and a charge. They feel like our plight is being ignored. So basically, just to set up what we just read to you, you've got the prosecuting attorney in this particular case, the man that's charged with prosecuting Darren Wilson, the shooter, the police officer that shot and killed Mike Brown. This particular guy, McCullough's father, his father was a police officer. And as a police officer, he was killed by a black man who was a suspect. There are some saying that there is some sort of conflict of interest due to his personal connection and his father being killed by a black man in the line of duty and him prosecuting a police officer killing a black man. What's your thoughts when you hear that?
That's definitely a conflict. I mean, if I was an attorney and my child was murdered by a white man, for instance, and I was supposed to defend a white man, then everybody would question, you know, would she really be able to represent this man fairly? You know, because your emotions, your feelings going to kick in. You know, even the memory of what happened to your child is going to kick in when this case is tried.
It's difficult to separate the two, I guess, is what I'm hearing you say. You know, have to have a Marcus J. Listen, we're going to take our first break of the night. And when we come back, I want to know about the very interesting tactic that a CNN anchor says that they should use in Ferguson, Missouri. This one's going to blow your mind. And why did a cop get fired? Not in Ferguson, but a cop got fired for a very interesting reason. And what is the international world saying about what's going on with the situation in Ferguson? We got comments coming from places outside the United States. Dating Pool Diva, Marcus J. Ain't no Steppin with Marcus J. Be back in a few minutes.